Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
Alejandro, good to talk to you again, as usual.
Nice to talk to you. Yes.
And I'm going to build this particular weekly podcast as us talking about M&Ms, which is to say Ennio Morricone passed away. Morricone, and we also had we both watched recently, we both revisited, because I think we've both seen it before, Panic in the Year Zero. And I'm so glad that I did revisit it, because it was actually, that jazzy score is a hoot. And we're talking, Panic in the Year Zero was directed by Ray Milland, came out in 1962. Ray was a prolific actor from the 30s and 40s who did a lot of work for Paramount, and he had a huge hit with Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend in 1945. Personally, one of my favorite films starring him was directed by Roger Corman, and that's X, the Man with the X-Ray Eyes. That actually came out a year after Panic in the Year Zero. This is definitely a movie that it holds well, and it's actually more pertinent than ever, right?
I had never seen it.
I thought you did. But.
I remember when I was a kid, this must have been about 1974 or 75 or something. I remember I saw in the newspaper, it was playing like one day only on a double bill in Liverpool. And I wanted to take the ferry across the Mersey and go see Ray Milland in Panic in the Year Zero, and then, because it was a Sunday, my parents were quite religious and they didn't think you should go to the cinema on Sunday.
Oh, man.
So I didn't get to go. So I had to wait like another 53 years. Did
that set you off against organized religion? Because I consider the movie theater my cathedral.
Oh, absolutely. But I have many reasons to oppose organized religion.
Yeah.
That was just one of them. But so I finally saw the movie, and it's good. I mean, it's quite uncompromising at times and quite dark and quite hokey at times. It's an AIP movie. It was the same producers as The Man with X-Ray Eyes, the company that did all the Corman.
Sure.
All those Corman movies.
Yeah.
But it's quite good. It's kind of the gold standard for early post-apocalyptic nuclear war films.
Yeah.
And it's really well directed. And the acting is good.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere that Corman felt that actually that Ray Milland was always forgetting his lines because he was a little overwhelmed with trying to do dual, coordinating being director and actor and all that. But I agree with you. I think it's on the money for me. And when you emailed me to tell me about the other titles, and you kept saying how they really do kind of echo Night of the Living Dead. There's one thing that I thought was interesting about that comment, which is that Ray Milland's character, his character's name in Panic in the Year Zero, which came out in 1962, the protagonist's name is Harry. And Night of the Living Dead, Romero's original, which came out later in 68, the guy who is also extremely survivalist, nihilist, that guy who wants to go into the basement and just protect his family at all costs, that character's name is also Harry. Probably coincidental. And of course, Harry's, it just evokes the image of a hairy ape. So it's kind of a primal thing. But who knows?
Ape. Oh, yeah.
Who knows? It might have been, there might have been a conscious connection or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, boy, this is definitely a lizard brain movie. I think what's kind of fun is that according to the bio in, I think it's on IMDb for Ray Milland, he actually in real life loved fishing and collecting information by reading the Encyclopedia Britannica. And how does Panic in the Year Zero start? Well, packing up the car and the RV to go fishing. So
that's right. They're towing the big trailer and they're going to go on a fishing vacation. And then when the bombs fall, then they're going to go back because grandma lives in LA, and they're driving back against all the traffic coming the other way. And then they realize this is not a good idea,
Well, it's pretty amazing because, Harry, who's, he's a father figure. He's got a son, he's got a daughter, he's got a wife and an RV, and he's going to go fishing. And pretty much as soon as they're out on the highway having to fight for themselves, he immediately steals a gun, he punches someone unconscious for gas, blows up a couple cars. And then when they finally find a cave, he sits down to pray at the table where he's convinced that civilization will continue as long as he shaves every day.
That's great, isn't it? That's great. That's great. And also, there's also a scene. I see these get extracted a lot and put up as little clips. The one about we're going to shave every day, and also the scene where he suddenly discovers that gas is $3 a gallon. One of my favorite quotes. It'll hit most people listening to it right now a little too close to home. But when they are in the cave, after having dealt with all these, horrible situations, and they're sitting down and they had a little prayer and they talked about shaving. And then Ray Milland looks around to his family and he says, for the next few days, we're going to have the kind of family togetherness you never dreamed of. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are not laughing at that comment because, they are having family togetherness of the likes that they had never dreamed of before. So, although it's not as absolutely gross as certain science fiction. I mean, there's a great science fiction short story called Lot, and its sequel, Lot's Wife, and they're absolutely terrifying, in the same kind of mode, but it gets much worse.
Yeah, those were weren't those inspirations for this particular movie?
I think maybe, yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised. Who wrote them? Was it Ten or Kuttner? I can't remember the name of the author, but they're very striking stories, and they were often anthologized.
God, there was the other quote that rang out at me when they were listening to the radio broadcaster who was warning civilians who are coming back to the city that there are no civilians. We are all at war. That seemed to resonate with anyone who might have been listening to a presidential speech near the Rushmore monument.
Oh man,
recently.
But we've been bombarded with that stuff since what? Since the late 70s? I mean, it was a war on. I remember driving down Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles past 20th Century Fox Studios, and on the radio there was some commentator going on about war on drugs, war on this, war on immigration, and then I look at this billboard that's outside Fox Studios and it says, Aliens 2, this time it's war. And so that kind of language, war on terror, we've been fighting the war on terror for the last 20 years. Yeah. I mean, so it's like this war mentality, and it's just the only way it's like a war is that there's an enormous amount of money to be made for the military contractors,
sure,
or the PPE contractors, as they.
Well, there's all kinds of new industries popping up now, aren't there? But we should switch gears now because we also wanted to give a little bit of time to the fact that I just read his obituary this morning, July 7th, in the New York Times. It was the obituary for Morricone.
Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, Ennio Morricone. It's a long obituary, as well it should be, but the very first paragraph contrasted with the very last paragraph. Can I read those to you?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so the very first paragraph. Ennio Morricone, the Italian composer whose atmospheric scores for spaghetti westerns and some 500 films by a who's who of international directors made him one of the world's most versatile and influential creators of music for the modern cinema, died on Monday in Rome. He was 91. So the first paragraph is talking about how he's made 500 movies and he's worked with all the greatest directors in world cinema. And then the last paragraph, talking to Mr. Pirelli's, Mr. Morricone placed his acclaimed oeuvre in a modest perspective. Quote, the notion that I am a composer who writes a lot of things is true on one hand and not true on the other hand, he said, continuing the quote. Maybe my time is better organized than many other people's, but compared to classical composers like Bach, Fresco, Baldi, Palestrina, or Mozart, I would define myself as unemployed. It's just, for an
it's very
unemployed
befitting modesty, of course. I mean, that's indeed noblesse oblige, right?
For an unemployed person to make over 500 scores, that is pretty amazing. And I do want to give a shout out to the score that he did for John Carpenter's The Thing, which among those 500 is one of, of course, I got many favorites. He in the obituary, it actually says that he was quoted in The Guardian in 2006. It says, asked by The Guardian why A Fistful of Dollars had made such an impact, he said, quote, "I don't know. It's the worst film Leone made and the worst score I did."
It's not the worst score he did.
I'm sure it's not. Yeah.
By any means, it's quite a good score. It's Leone's weakest Western because it's a remake of Yojimbo, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah. I didn't even, it was in reading the obit that I learned that he never spoke English. He never left Rome to compose for years, and for years refused to fly anywhere, although he did eventually fly all over the world to conduct orchestras.
And that was very interesting because he really did. Obviously, we all think of ourselves in a certain grandiose way, and he disowned the Westerns for a long time, didn't want to talk about them or have anything to do with them. But he realized he could only get those big gigs directing an orchestra, a live orchestra before an enormous audience, if he would do The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah.
They didn't want to hear The Mission, and they didn't want to hear, whatever else he thought was good. They wanted to hear that cowboy music.
Well, I think he might have gotten a little bit of flack back in the day for scores that were, well, what we could say right now that were maybe kind of campy. But what's interesting is that, they, in the same way that those very iconic close-ups of the squinting eyes in a Western, they were sort of hyperbolic maybe, but Morricone's scores also foregrounded themselves in a way that fit perfectly with that aesthetic. And so I
think they did. They were perfect for the films. They're absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And think about how important music is in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or in Once Upon a Time in the West. You couldn't imagine the film without the score. Yeah,
and he also did some stuff for some political movie. Obviously he worked with everyone, but he also worked with Pasolini, and he did Pontecorvo's The Battle of Algiers in '66. So,
Byrne, Queimada for Pontecorvo, and he did Sacco and Vanzetti. He did The Ballad of Sacco and Vanzetti with Joan Baez as his co-author. Yeah, and Bertolucci's 1976. So, yeah, we could just rattle those off on and on and on. No, he has an amazing filmography. I thought he was 92, but 91, 92, and he scored 500 films. Not bad, huh? Yeah, I will be thinking about him tomorrow as I go through some of my. I think I've got about 8 or 9 records that have got his scores at least. So I'll have a full day ahead of me listening to Morricone. Well, and I'm shout out to Jason now, who's our producer, to say, Jason, don't be afraid about that thing I sent you, because I sent Jason this 2-minute mashup of Morricone Western music, and I think it's fair use. I think we can play it. Absolutely. And no one will ever know. All right. Well, we're and on that note, we're gonna let the master lead us out.